slamming it. I've slammed it. It's been slammed. Welcome to the I was going to just say my name podcast. It's the Story of the Apprentice podcast, featuring me. Is that what we say? First of all, it's a podcast about D&D. It's a podcast about storytelling. It's a podcast about the journey of Tucker Patterson's venture into professional GMing.
Mhm.
He is the apprentice. I am the person who is teaching the apprentice. I'm Jesse T. William. And with me, as I mentioned before, is
Oh my God, Tucker Patterson. I don't know why it's caught me off guard for the second time in a row. I should have
I
expected it
I
that
gotta
time.
keep you on your toes. I
I
gotta find ways
guess.
to keep you on them toes. Why are we here today?
Talk about D&D.
Is that wait? So we were talking about actually in this moment. The last time we talked was 24 hours and 20 minutes ago.
Yeah,
And
almost
then
perfect.
we had so many thoughts that were like, so first of all, a little bit of insight into the way that my brain works. I feel as though we shouldn't be on a like twice a week schedule, but like once every 5 days or
Once every five
something.
days. That
And
does
not
feel
with
good.
like not with like a strict like adherence, but like the general
No.
like every 10 days there should be two. Um, but we went like 6 days without anything. And I was like, we need to make up for this. That's just how
And
my
here we
brain
are,
thought. So here we are. So
back to
I
back.
know we have at least one listener who's already tried to get through the last one we did 24 hours and now 21 minutes ago. We had a topic. We were talking about topic. We were talking about race stuff in our
Yeah.
settings. And so first of all, I want to share this thought. Actually, I don't know if I want to share it first. It's the thought I was thinking of towards the end of the episode, but perhaps I've had a number of reflections. So to recap the conversation, we were talking about how our worlds represent different, I guess, like ethnicities. So I use that term like very loosely because ethnicity in my world means a slightly different thing than uh, listen, you know what, where we'll start. So a long time ago, not that long ago, but I was like thinking, because I always think about this stuff. I think about stuff too much. I'm a bit of a chronic overthinker. um but I was like, what's the point, not of life generally, but of race in D&D? Like, what is the
Hmm.
function? Because in fantasy storytelling, the function of race, whether intentional or not, serves as placeholder images or like cultures, um, or placeholder like whatever's for other real world cultures, right? So, um, what's a good example of this? I was thinking about this a lot when Lord of the Rings of Power show was coming out. And I guess maybe a good example of it is like specifically in a lot of D&D texts of like orcs typically are placeholders for general like tribal cultures, whether it be African or indigenous or an amalgamation of the two.
Hmm.
So the function of race in D&D is very shitty. Um, and so the solution, or like I suppose the question is then like, what do you do from there? So you realize the function of race is really shitty, like to have cultures represented as monolithic like races, and like the only a race can only have this one culture. It's kind of a silly billy thing to do, right? So where do you go from there? Because inherently the function of race, or the function of race is a like alt right kind of frame of the world. It's like a white supremacist fantasy. And I don't mean that in the sense of like buzzwords, but literally, if you were to like ask a white supremacist to build a fantasy, those are the tools that they would use to
Mm-hmm.
separate um, the their ideas, or to communicate their ideas. So the problem is, so I think race is inherently a political thing. And what I was thinking about a lot in the past year is like, what is the politic? What is the frame or the thing that you can communicate using race that is more progressive? And I don't think there really is one. So here's the solution that I've come to as a jumping off point, or here's just some thoughts. And I think we've talked about this before, but in the same way that in the real world, humans made all of these like slight adaptations to like that are extremely specific to like the place that they are from, like the very specific region of the world that they're from. And then very rapidly, we suddenly got very globalized. And none of that shit matters because we have all of these other things we've built around us that make, you know, blue eyes or the shape of my nose like obsolete, or my skin, right? Like it makes it, we have sunscreen, you know, it makes the function of those obsolete. And in a similar sense, I think the conclusion I kind of came to was that maybe in my world at the dawn of time, when all of the races were made, there was kind of like either an experiment or an idea behind them. Because I think well, actually, I that's this is actually a thing I can't really get into without talking about spoilers of the world, like secrets that I hold like so dear to my chest. But anyways, I think there was like some kind of purpose, and I think it doesn't fucking matter. The
Mm-hmm.
purpose that I've come down to is that it doesn't fucking matter. Um, uh, what? Yeah, the purpose was. Um, so then there's this idea of like, so for example, in with that elfin orc had a little baby thing that I talked about. What that does as a function in relation to the kind of like white supremacist fantasy is that it disarms it of all of the like bioessentialism in it. So in your classic D&D whatever, it's like orcs are like this and this is their culture and whatever. And the um function of that, not module, but the supplement is like disarms um the bad stuff, brain breaking. It just disarms the whites. What am I saying, Tucker? I can you tell that I've run 6 hours of D&D today?
Mm.
Seven. Sorry, 7 hours of D&D today. Um, it disarms the function of race by allowing all of the races to fuck each other and make babies, which is a really explicit way of putting it. So I think that is a I think where I want to start is that I think that is a good solution to the problem. It is not one that I can logistically accept not because I don't want things to get together, but the idea, because in my world, because in my line of thinking, here's where
Mm-hmm.
my brain goes.
Mm-hmm.
You just have a gradient. You the time span of the world would very quickly, especially in the time period that I run in my world, you would not have like like races, or like distinct races in that way. You would just have this like general gradient. And then in my head, and you can share your thoughts, but in my head, because and I don't like saying this because also I feel like a lot this the phrasing of it, a lot of fucking like shitty people on the internet are like, what's the point? Oh, there's a cat doing licking bulls.
Where's my
Um
fucking gun?
Nerf gun.
I can't. I don't know where it. Hey, stop! God damn
Don't
it!
Moon Boy.
Look at it. Look at that fucking monster.
I thought it was the good one. Anyways, so shitty people on the internet constantly say things like, "What's the point of this? If you can just do this," and that's bad argumentation. But in my head, it's like I don't maybe not even what's the point is the right phrasing, but it's just like it becomes yeah, I guess that's the best way I can phrase it is that like the what's the point of making the distinction if there's going to be a gradient? Um yeah, that's
I don't
the
know. I here's the thing. I have never thought about that too terribly, but that's because my mind has already accepted everybody fucking.
I think here's a
I
world
like I
building
don't know
fact.
if somebody was like I would like to somehow like make something that's not mix the stats and I want to play these two. I whatever. I don't give a
I
shit.
think
Like
I think everybody be fucking in my world. I just don't think
everybody be
I just
fucking.
don't think babies come out all the time. That's my thing. Of um like I think especially like how do I explain this? Um I think in my world, because you have like great healthcare via magic, there's that villainous cat. You
He's
have
there. Do I have something I can throw? Yeah, he's too stupid. He doesn't care.
um so you have great access to healthcare. You have strong senses of community. So I think what you have in my world is you have like when two people of the same like race, and even that's a weird term because that, but the same like race gets together. I think they just have
Mhm.
a lot of kids. I think they just have a Catholic amount of kids. And then everyone else in the community, if they're not in a pair that produce kids, just like is there to support and like be a part of the community. I think in most worlds, or in most places, I think that's the most sensible thing, um for my world building. Because again, the only thing that stops me from being like everybody fucking and they're all having babies is just the logistics to accommodate that. Just because in my
Yeah.
world, when I think of every single character, instead of just being like you're a human, simple as that, my brain would have to every single NPC would have to be like, what's your makeup? What is this? So let's
How
reasonably,
many of what are you?
yeah, exactly. And that's an insane thing that I don't want
So
to do. So I have
here's
to, yeah, please,
here's I have like a okay, I have a rant prepared for you
please.
now. So I feel like I have a little bit of easier time in my world building, and this will probably eventually change as the world I play in changes. However, I've got like at least a couple years before I need to worry about that. So, like in my world, healthcare is not as accessible. Um, and that's partially because like magic in the world that I play in is very fickle, and most people are very afraid of it. And there are large stipulations around the way that people use magic. Because I ended up, I don't like that he's doing things, and
I'm
I
listening to you very intently, but I'm watching the cat.
I want him to stop, but I don't think there's anything I can do to make him stop without like taking the bowl or whatever. I don't even know what's in that bowl. I hope it's not something that'll. I'm just gonna stand up.
Please.
It's not something that'll kill him. So it's just like I think it's just like shredded beef. He'll be fine. Um, and he gets away with it this one time because the only other thing I could do about it is go take the bowl, bring it downstairs, dump it out, put it in the dishwasher. I don't have time for that right now. So he just gets a little snacky. Fucking bastard. Both of my cats are like very like food oriented. The high patient really likes bread. You have to hide all of the bread in the house. Like it can't be out. She will rip the entire bag apart and get into the bread, and the whole bread will go stale. Moon Boy likes pizza. That's his favorite thing. If you leave pizza out, he's going to steal it. And it's funny because you watch him carrying an entire slice in his little mouth and like dragging it across the floor like a little monster. But whatever, he gets a little snack anyway. And that's partially because I was like, A, because I'm a Dragon Age bitch at my core. And that's like one of the central things about Dragon Age is that everybody fucking hates spellcasters. And then second of all, magic being so widespread, like there's some problems that it fixes that I don't want it to fix yet. I need those problems to still be like a factor. I need those to be a thing. Um, However, it puts me in like a unique position of like actually it allows me to do a lot of different things in a lot of different areas. I won't get into it, but there are some races that across the board would just have a harder time anyway. Can you imagine a gnome trying to give birth to an orc baby? You're gonna die. And in a world where like that kind of like healthcare isn't as accessible, you either don't have the baby or you and the baby probably both die. Anyway, it doesn't matter. There's not like a ton you can do there. So that there are just certain crossovers that I imagine are very rare. I'm trying to picture the gnome person who has successfully given birth to an orc baby and the kind of like physical trauma that entails of pushing it out of you. And uh I have some homebrew races that are really, really big. Already half of the population of any other race cannot give birth to one of those babies. It's the size of like a 2-year-old and it's newborn. Don't attempt to push that out of your body. um and then half elves have always been a thing already. Those exist. Half orcs, those exist. um uh, Genasi, depending on how you because I very rarely see Genasi run the way that they are written in the book. So depending on what you do
I don't
with
even
that,
know how they're written, honestly.
it's somebody fucked a Jin. Like you went and you fucked an elemental. And and they even say in the book that technically any race can do it, and that sometimes the Genasi will have features of that race. However, they are their own, they have their own specific stats. So it just kind of like brings along this assumption of like human. You can here's what I would like make the argument of, right? Is that like a half elf, like the name alone doesn't really like it's there's only elf in that. Everybody makes the assumption that it's a human. But I think like theoretically you could use those stats and just like fuck up their appearance for flavor text. Like who cares? There's so many different ways you can do that. Same with half orc. But you don't really see like the same like dragonborn, like halflings, gnomes, um, stuff like that. I but again, I've just accepted that people be fucking. And so if somebody came to me with like an idea for something like that, I don't even think I think twice about it. And I think it already happens in my world. I think that I'm having thoughts. Thoughts are coming to my head as I'm talking. um, but again, there are just some things that are not as feasible. Did they ever talk about how are Dragonborn? Like, do they
So I do know, and you know what the worst thing is for me personally?
Mhm.
I anytime anyone um is like refers to any bit of lore that I did not directly tell them, when they're like, well, it says this, and I'm like, did I say that? No. But in the book, I think dragonborns like lay eggs or something.
Yeah, that was my. I was like, they're not. So
They lay eggs.
there's a feasible that is a more like yeah like you've got a more complicated process happening here. Some bits might not cross over, depending. And even then, you could probably still make some shit up. You know, I don't know. I guess I just don't like feel like it. So I have two schools of thought. I have the part of me that is Virgo Tucker. That's like I have to think about every single like logistical part of this. You know what I mean? And then there's the other side of me that's like, I don't know, it's a dumb fantasy game. Why do I give a fuck?
I give so many fucks. Because it's like it's just because I think I everything that is in my world carries meaning. I think this is it for me. I think this is phrasing. Everything in my world carries meaning. And so an elf, even if that is not inherently like elves don't need to be dexterous, but there's like a visual, for example, like Fulia has all their like different kinds of elves or whatever. Um it like carries some kind of meaning. And so does an orc, and so does a human, whatever. And doesn't necessarily mean that those races are limited to those meanings, but there is a kind of baseline. And so half elf for me, human and elf makes sense. Half orc, human orc makes sense because we there's kind of a built-in to some degree like implied meaning to what that is. Um, but then it's like it's just a numbers game after that point of like half elf, that's a dwarf and an elf. Okay, half and so at that point it gets very I don't want to accommodate the logistical burden of figuring out what everything means, because if it's happened once, I think my thing, if it's happened once, it's happened 1,000 million times. And so I need to, what's the structure for it happening 1,000 million times? um
Well, and even then, okay, I think that like in a place like how do I put this? I think it depends on like some of your other settings. I think for Leah, it's a little more likely that you'd still have like a very good population of the base races, mostly just because um like for example, my aunt Shelby, half Taiwanese, half white, marries a fully Chinese man. Her kids do not look like any semblance of white. There is not a single ounce of like whiteness, I swear to God, in those children. Um, and like if both of them are like any of them go to on to marry somebody else, Chinese, Taiwanese, whatever, which is fairly likely considering how that side of my family is. Like it's just like it wouldn't even for whiteness like basically disappears off the face of the planet at that point. You know what I mean? And if anything, I would like argue even culturally, she probably doesn't feel very white given like the way she lives and where she grew up and the man that she married. But like like I think it also like depends on the community around you, the type of it, and like that's random. My aunt could have married anybody. You know what I mean? And at that point, it's like it's like plugging it into a computer. I'm like, okay, well, like what are the odds? You know? And I think like in a setting like Philia, especially with like how some of the communities are, I think that there would still be like like a fairly maybe not like super far down the line, you know, maybe eventually it'd start to get real muddled, but for a while, even once there was a lot of ambiguous children running around, there'd probably still be quite a a fair chunk of the base races chilling about. I think it kind of depends. That being said, and like not every setting is like that. Like when I have to think about that for like my setting where everything's already not homogenous, I'm like, damn, why isn't there just like a bunch of like super ambiguous children all over the place?
I that's the thing. And I think like because also I want to make a distinction, a much clearer distinction in my world between race and ethnicity, which is because there are like different ethnicities of
Oh
elves
yeah.
and orcs. And I also I think I mentioned this last episode, but I also try to because a lot of the time I think people with dwarves and elves seek to, because of the way they're portrayed in like especially in like Lord of the Rings and like Tolkien's works, as like very humanoid. And I want to make as many races that I feasibly can feel more fantastical and less grounded, which is why all the elves have colorful skin and the like all like there's a clear color theme between the dwarves, the orcs, and the elves. Um, but yeah, like there's so like purple orcs are in Folia behind my head, and like green orcs are up here, and I'm thinking that they're like these like blue sea orcs that are like down here, and like there are orcs with like midnight black skin, in Misithia here, which like might be, and also I kind of like this storytelling of like there is the Misithian scar, which is the right there, which is the place where the goddess of death ascended and wiped death across the land. And I think there's this like interesting kind of world building thing of like, are all these races, do they have this like midnight black skin because of the Misithian scar and like the attachment to death, or was that just a happenstantial thing? There's I don't know, just a random thing that, but and then yeah, so there's all these like different ethnicities of orcs, and they can like color combo for sure. But I think when it comes to, because the inclination, I think the inclination of the like um I feel feels weird saying like the race mixing. I hate how like charged the term is, because you're like,
Uh,
well,
it definitely sounds bad when it
yeah,
comes out of your mouth.
yeah. The because I think the because that is I think the fundamental problem is just the the way like all of the cultural context surrounding race, right, and what it means to a lot of people. Because I think the reason why an elf and an orc had a little baby is a good supplement is because that the way most people think about race in D&D, I think is still with the function in mind. But whether it's consciously or subconsciously, it's like the orcs have a different culture, and the humans have a different culture, and the elves have a different culture, and this supplement serves as a way for me to like get a more sense of maybe not myself or whatever it is, um I see like a lot of good in the function of that supplement. And again, I think for like most other people's games, I think it's like a really good thing. Just doesn't logistically work, for me, just to accommodate the scale of my world. Because then I think about, so for example, the Sovitic occupation. There are like very very few Sovitic individuals in Valia, or people who have like Semitic ancestry, because the majority of Semitic races are really fucking weird. There's like there are elves and there are humans, but then there are also like those fucking goat people who are just goat from the like pecs up, and there are these people who have like deep like dark green skin with this like bioluminescent like orange shit, and there's people who are like bison people, and there's all this shit, right? um that like feasibly for 500 years in Folia wouldn't like, because of this culture of Savennum, wouldn't have like that much of an impact to like throw the um like whole course of like the the aesthetic of the country off forever, but would have a significant impact. Would be very notable if you had all these like half goat people and half bison people, like just like imagine just like not half goat as in like um half of you is a goat, but like half you're just a goat here and human here. Just picture a goat's face and a human's face, and then put a gradient slider in between, and just put it dead center in the middle, and just like what, yeah, right. So that's the like logistical thing. I was saying something earlier, but I think I got distracted about Savannah. I've been thinking about that setting a lot recently. Um, so yeah, the function of an alpha Noric had a little baby is a good function, but I think it still treats, and I don't really want to like pretend that there is a political problem with this, because again, I think it effectively disarms the like bad elements of the core of races in fantasy, but I think it still leaves this like it gets into this territory from a logistical sense where it circles back around to like the racial makeup, the way that like the way I said like what's your race mix or whatever earlier, like or like what's your makeup. It feels like a question that like white supremacists ask, to be like what percent, um so it comes back around to that kind of thing where it just starts feeling weird again. And I think perhaps the best I can say or the best I can offer in my world is the like just the scale of it with ethnicity and having different ethnicities of orcs. Because again, like I I want most settings for every races that aren't halflings and humans to feel um ethnically agnostic. Like there's not a real world one to one. For most, that's not entirely true, but for the most part, not a real world like one to one comparison of oh, orcs in this setting are supposed to be black, or like or like this, all of these, whatever. Um, but so I want people, like anyone, to be able to step in the shoes of most races and feel like it, like they can embody that race without having it be like burden
Yeah.
the culture. But I also want people to be, if they do want to be like, I want to be someone who has a like mixed origin, and give them that opportunity. But rather than it be like, maybe that's a half orc, but maybe it's like you, some of your orcish ancestry comes from a faraway place, like something like that. um so many I have, I mean, and I think it's like there's not a clear answer again, I think, because
No,
the
no.
fundamental
And it also
problem.
depends on how you look at it. Because, like, for example, you were talking about how races for you, you like to make them feel kind of fantastical.
Mhm.
But whether you look at it like that, or whether you look at um whether or not you look at it like that, or if you look at it from a more like biological standpoint of like why did certain races evolve to have these specific traits and whatnot. And then if you really wanted to get into it, like if you really wanted to like come up with the logistics for certain races, getting doing their thing, getting it on, uh you could kind of like go fuck it and just decide which um traits are generally more dominant and what is more seen, and you could even like fuck with it if you wanted. There's a, again, like you said, there's a lot of ways that you could do it. There's a lot of ways you can get into it. Fuck, there was something else I was going to say that felt very important. uh oh, I remember. I think, like, again, there are lots of ways you can get into it, and it really depends on like the way that an individual decides to world build, right? Um, And nope, it's gone. Never mind. Fuck it. It's
I
left the building. It's
to
gone.
to
Uh,
fill spot for you to see if you can chase that thought. The one neutralizer or like equalizer for people fucking and having babies is Genasi's, Tieflings, and Asimar, and also a race called Pavar. Just any of like the divine or like extraplanar races to me
mhm,
are not a because you do have for me Tieflings and Asimar and Genasi are just baseline a people like in the different planes, but also you can get tieflings through like the weird like a demon has touched your bloodline or like a devil, I guess,
mhm,
or like Asimar in the same way. And but I think that being an Asimar is not a or any of those things is not a and not even a biological thing because I don't tend to like to think of my world in too much of a scientific, like biological or whatever sense. But I think in Asimar, you can like pass down that lineage to like anything. So like an elf and an Asimar would have an elven Asimar baby, and then
mhm.
say that elven Asimar and an orc got together, the baby would come out orcish and Asimar and no elf. It's like the Asimar can like pass along because I feel like that's a simple way. The only
Yeah.
workplace it doesn't work is that Asimars and Tieflings or Asimars and Genasis or like things like that. Those don't click
Yeah.
together because they're
So
separate
yeah,
things.
in Dragon Age, because that's what this reminds me of, is in Dragon Age, half-elf children do not look like half-elves. They look like humans. They sometimes like maybe there's something that looks a little elf-like, but other than that, you don't see it. It's non-existent. Um, and I think that's considering that I I don't think I've ever even seen in Dragon Age them address what we're talking about at all. Besides that one situation, I think that's how they kind of reconcile it, is that yeah, elves just don't look like elves. And they look entirely like humans, and like probably even in a situation which a half elf gets with another elf, probably would look mostly human. Like it's really hard to run those human genes out of the bloodline. Um and that's kind of what I was saying earlier, like with like deciding what genes do what, is like how you can kind of like reconcile some of that if you'd like, you know. um I think it just kind of depends on, again, how you want to do your world building and how it works out for you. I tend to be, again, I like to think about everything logistically, but I think this is one of those things where I end up just falling in like a rule of cool area where I'm like, I don't know, do whatever you want. um but like if I think about like in my world, like I guess like I do to some degree because of the lack of like single races grouping together. I do have to kind of think about people chucking and fucking. What happens when they do?
People be fucking, and it's an important
Yeah,
part of world building. Is
yeah,
to
you got to think
accommodate the
about it.
logistics of how people be fucking, and it's true. I think that in my world I don't really explore because also I'm someone who has a personal principle, um, does not confront anyone in game like anything remotely sexual. My world is so generally like desexed, because I know how easy it is for people to just have like trauma around things and advances and whatever. And so like the even like the romance between that like budded with like um, Abizat and Savale was like really, really like at first kind of like pushing it for me. It was really like this is like I need to figure this
Unfortunately,
out.
that's who I am as a person. So I'm like, I'm going to kiss every NPC. Dude, there was like, look, there every pretty much every single NPC ever like presented to me in any D&D game. I'm like, can I kiss them? Can, can Brandon and our game last night introduced like a literal god. I was like, what does he look like? And he was
Is
like,
he
oh, like you
sexy?
can kind of like there's like some features that you have to like kind of focus on, like it's like very like bleh, weird god shit. But then when you kind of look and he's in your peripheral, it doesn't really look like anything. And I went, oh, that's hot. In all fairness, like I'm a gross little guy. I see like bloodborne monsters and I'm like, damn, you know? So I'll I just want to kiss everything all the time. Um but you're right. Your world is definitely desexed. Though the Bunky Fuel does like to joke about it. Uh,
The Bunky Q really sexes out the world, huh?
we the Bunky Fuel. There was that text replay. I don't know if you ever read the truth or
The only ones I've read are the Aelith and Lorna ones. I
okay.
can't.
the
I don't
the
have time for
truth
anything else.
the the truth of Zone and Dare. Zone of Truth and Dare. Fuck. That there was this joke made. Parker like just did this. Nobody talked about it, but it was so funny that he was like gonna go get Savale and Abby to play, and he comes back and he goes, "I don't know, they were playing their own game and told me to go away." And I was like, "It's giving my parents, they like to wrestle." But and then there's the constant objectification of Parker's character Aelith, um, which I spent like the first several sessions when Aelith like Parker described Aelith as like this big buff elf who never wears a shirt, and I was immediately like, oh, so his boobs are out. And it was Trexia who was the first one to like, kind of like tiptoe in there, and I was like, oh, perfect. I can never stop talking about it then. And luckily, I think it's easier when you're close with people, because as the Monkey Club got closer, it became a lot easier for us to make jokes about that kind of stuff. And then also like in my Friday game, um, in my Friday game, there's a lot of I've told you about one of my players who pretty much any game you put him in, not anymore. He's not like this in my Monday game. But in my Friday game and in any game I had been in with him before, like he's a can I seduce the dragon? And he will try and seduce anything. Now, I think that's partially because he's branching out of charisma a little bit. And so and like a lot of players when they check into a charisma role, and I'm guilty of this sometimes. I've not done it every time, but Surveillance definitely fits into this like slot of like you check into a charisma role and they're kind of like these like loud bastards, and they and they're sluts. But my Friday game definitely, like there's a lot of jokes that happen with that. It it's like a all the time constant thing. It doesn't help that the one person who makes a lot of art of all of the characters all the time, he'll literally just sit there and doodle scenes as they're happening. It doesn't help that we often talk about how he has a problem with sexifying everybody's characters. He's incapable of drawing something not be sexy. I to the point where I was like playing a little homebrew thing and I'm playing this little like hyena artificer, made him so sexy, and I was like, it's a dog.
It's a dirty dog, man.
Yeah, and he was like, I can make him less sexy, and I was like, it's okay. You've already drawn it on the character sheet. But he's just that's what he does. He can't help himself. There's only like maybe one character he's ever had like kind of look like a little nasty man, and there is adult content of that ugly man that exists on the internet, on Twitter. So even then, there's not like anything I can do. But again, we're very close. So there is like an idea of like boundaries. Most of it's jokes anyway. Some of it's not, but and also like and not to the point where anything ever gets like really role played out, because that's like weird. um that's weird for everybody. But there are a lot of jokes. There are a lot of um sexualizing everybody's characters all the time. Uh
For so go ahead.
oh no.
Okay.
Okay.
For Savale and Abby, quite regularly in a set, not quite regularly, but like at least once a session, I'd be like, this would be a good time for them to fuck. There's like I'm just like that. I feel like both of them are horny, and I would never say that to the
No,
rest of the Bunky Cool. But
they're gonna hear it
in
now.
in my yeah, they're all listening. But in my head, I'm like, yeah, they like anytime that they're off screen,
I'm
and
like, they're
there's not a
doing
reason for
something.
them to not. They're fucking.
They
On
do.
the
They
topic, to
yeah.
stay on topic of people be fucking. They listen, anyways.
They
So
they 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 be fucking. They be
they be
fucking.
fucking. They be
They're out
fucking.
there. I feel like that was kind of like, and that's like kind of the thing with D&D and like relationships is I think that to some level there's always an assumed they be fucking. Um. Oh. Oh, my computer just did something really weird. You
Oh.
like froze, and then every little head movement that you did happened like really fast. So it looked like you were going like you just were like this, and then you went back, and I was like, oh no, is my internet because my internet dropped earlier today. So I was like, please no.
Bad timing. But you know what? You know what? Speaking of the Bunky Cool, so Elijah, who we've mentioned many times, messages me today. Just the like welling up emoji, just the like whatever, you know what it is. And we know exactly what it is, which is me trying to make him cry on the last episode. However, we have done something that has probably
He
or
also
I've
sent me that emoji
uh,
earlier.
I have done something that probably has upset him because one of his characters, and he didn't ask me about this, and it's fine, it's whatever. But one of his characters is like a dwarf slash elf, like half dwarf, half elf, and I'm like, the moment he's because he didn't clear with me, and again,
Oh
there's no reason to
shit.
not clear, but the entire he just like said
Calling
it,
you
and I
out.
was like, not canon. Like just in the back of my head, I'm like, just not how it works, unfortunately. And I'm not gonna take it away from him. He's
We're
going to
gonna
have
let
to
him
hear
have
it
that.
because it was implied very heavily earlier in the podcast. But there was a it just like anytime he describes them, I'm like, that's not how the races work, unfortunately. Um, but because also, anyways, can we just talk about, let's just keep talking about races. Oh, but in a different context, because I just want to talk about fun little guys. Because I've come into actually no, what I really wanted to do is and so this actually bridges the two things. So what I want to do this episode as well is just actually like heavily get into the world building of one of my settings. One that you're not a part of. It's called the Evans, because I want to kind of actually, here's a bunch of things are coming together. It's all clicking together right now. It's like it's a bunch of little puzzle. You know, how do you ever do puzzles a lot? That's a bad way of phrasing it. Do you like puzzles? Do you do puzzles at all? Like the
I
like jigsaw.
yes.
Okay, so you know, when you hit critical mass in the jigsaw puzzle, and you just pieces just start clicking. They're just
Hmm.
falling into place.
It's moving.
That's me right now. So this setting, which is called the Ebons or Abinabad, is this place in my world. I'm running 4 games in it, so I'm making money off this setting, and it's intended to be largely like ag, like what's it called, like culturally agnostic to as much as I can. The only thing from the real world that is inspired by. So my brother, we're adopted. My brother is Lebanese Iranian, and he met his like Lebanese side of the family, and there's this picture of him somewhere in Lebanon, and they're just these like sandy mountains with all this greenery on it, and I was like, I really like that image. It's a very inspiring image, and I just took that kind of idea as a base, like here's some elements of what this setting looks like, and built it with that visual in mind. And so all of the races in it, for the most part, with the exception of rock gnomes, just rock gnomes, are homebrew. Well, I guess there's Dragonborn, but there's a whole complicated thing with Dragonborn. Anyways, so we have, and I might have talked about these races before, but I'm gonna go for the full breakdown. I'm gonna explain what the setting is, and then I'm gonna explain the frustration or this weird spot that this setting sits in, as far as like, did I make a racist thing? And then I'm gonna say
Okay.
other things. So
I can't wait to decide whether or not you're racist.
I feel like I have not done the most clean job at explaining myself in the last 30 minutes of the last episode and the first however long it's been at this one. But
Mhm.
so first of all, you have a race called Aeginians, and they are orangutan like people, except their fur generally is much darker. It's like a dark green, very like full kind of dark green, and their fur, if they spend a lot of time in one place, can grow out to camouflage into that place. Their faces are much more humanoid than orangutans, so it's like flattened and a little less rounded, to just make them look more human like. There are Tanal. Sorry, back up. Aeginians, this is the only setting in my world where they are found. And that for a lot of races is becoming the standard of like here's the only place where they are found unless they have migrated, because a lot of races like migrate into new places. Um anyways, I'm sorry, I just started thinking about the chipmunk race that eventually gets into Flea. Anyways, so that's one. There's the Tanal, which I've mentioned here before. They're the rock stick bug people. So take a stick bug, turn it to stone, put it on a sliding scale between it and or human, and 2/3 of the way human. So you have these like tall people with like 2 legs and 2 arms, and there's like no separation between like neck and head, and it's very interesting looking. You have Leviathans, which are like tiny little bug guys. So they do have 2 sets of arms, just 2 legs, and have like very like non-human like mouths. They have like little like pincer mouths. You
Mhm.
have Fedokin, which are like taller, like beetle-like people. Like if you've ever seen Kubo and the Two Strings, it's like the dad in that.
Mhm.
Except they have a little bit of bioluminescence on the back. Then you have Kemets, and Kemets are a very interesting thing in my world from a racial perspective, because nobody would ever be allowed to play a Kemet because they have a very specific thing about them. And it's a strange thing because the intention of creating most races is just like or not the intention, but part of building race is the idea that someone could feasibly play this race. But chemists are truth seers. So part of their like the magical physiology of them is that they always know when someone is lying, and they have this like very like large kind of frames, and they're very monstrous looking, and they
Mhm.
are prone to frustration when people lie to them, and sometimes like the weight of their existence of being truth seers can like drive them to madness and cause them to like just not be people anymore. And so there are a lot of like interesting ideas that I don't know. Well, I don't have the brain capacity to explain it. But anyways,
Mhm.
so in this setting, um, uh, and this will go into to how do I fucking brain long time ago, in a galaxy that is this galaxy and a planet that is this planet, there was the Soviet Empire, the first era, eventually conquered Philea. And then in their first era, they came and conquered this part of the map, which is the Ring of Talvis, which has a bunch of settings in it. And the Ebons were one of those settings. And so all they did stuff, a couple of years later, they were thrown out by these people called the Afrans, and then these like East Asian inspired dragons. Because I don't like the idea that all dragons in the world are just European, but I
I'm
also don't.
already on that. I've been there.
But also I have like the bare bones down for this kind of dragon, only because it feels really weird for me to like claim authority and absolution over a representation that is absolutely from another culture. It's not just like here's um like Asian people, but like here's very specific like representation from a culture that anyways. So those dragonborn, so those dragons came and with these people freed the Ring of Talvis, and then left over from that, after all this time, there are still those kinds of dragonborn present in the setting. And then time goes by, they get conquered again by a different dragon empire called the Ferudic or the Empire of Ferudal. And so the Empire of Ferudal are your European style dragons. They are a kind of big villainous faction in my world. And in the setting, you have um, in the games that I'm running, the Empire about 5 years ago was thrown out, and the people engaging in the setting, or most of the characters, are from outside of the country. They've been kind of like this open call to adventures has been put out by one of the factions in this setting, and all these adventures come in and kind of get like caught up in the story, and like the different factions are like using these trying to use these adventurers as like little puppets who don't really understand the politics and can be like manipulated easily until they like become the wiser. um so the fund one of the and there's like it's a very political setting. There's like all these different factions who are like vying for power in the absence of this empire. But one of the conflicts is in the like southeastern territory, which is called Aegini, and it's where Aegini, and it's called, sorry, words are hard. It is called Aegini, and it is where Aeginians are from, and then or where they trace their origins to. And although it's like is homogenized the right word? Like it's not exclusively Aeginians, but you do have a an order called the Aeginian Knights, which are mostly Aeginian the race, and exclusively Aeginian the people. And they are fundamentally like a fascist faction in the world. And in contrast to the Empire Ferudal, they are also like at least imperialist. And so during the reign of the Empire Feudal, they were like, anyone who is not down with our religion is lesser than us. And there's this hierarchy of like dragons are like above everything, and then dragonborn are kind of along with like anyone who is religious and whatnot. You have your religious faction or class, and then you have everyone else. And so that's like the part of the like I don't know the trauma of this setting, from that is like behind the setting a little bit that like informs some of the decisions. So anyways, this the Aeginians, the Aeginianites, um I'll start where I started. It's changed since then, but where I started was they don't like dragonborn because of what the empire did for a very very long time. And because of what the Dragonborns represent, they want to like excise these Dragonborns because there's still remnants of that army in the country, and so and they were kind of afraid of actually facing the remnants of this army. So what
Mm.
happened from a political standpoint was rather than face the army, they would like use the Dragonborn as a um scapegoat, like just any dragonborn as a scapegoat for the crimes of the empire. But the problem is, the empire was there for such a long time that dragonborns are just, or like the Ferudic dragonborns are just part of the setting. And so I was like, that is just racism. And there's like a sensible cause, or like a you understand how it got there, and the function of it, but it's still,
Mm.
to me, it was like too close to racism. And so I decided that it was like anyone who aided the empire, anyone who is friendly with the empire was a problem. And so it doesn't all need to be Dragonborn, but it still gets thrown on Dragonborn a lot. Um, but basically, it's just like they use these like scapegoats. Um, but the like I was like the just the logistical play of this working out in the world is like very very delicate for it not to be something shitty. And I think again, I'll also say one thing I realized is that overthinker, chronic overthinker,
Yeah,
a
we
lot
knew
of
that.
people who engage in this setting don't think about it that much, or can recognize the kind of themes of like, oh, Aeginians are, and don't really dive that deep into the politics, even though the Aeginians are pretty explicit in how they are shitty. And even then in the kind of phrasing, like Aeginians as in the specific subset of crossover of whatever, like the people, not the race. Um, but yeah, so I entered this space where I was like, I want to solve this. I want to fix this. I want to come to the right solution. And I had this like profound moment because um I had this thing where I was like, I just want an answer. I just want an answer. And I was thinking of like reaching out to someone to be like, what's the answer to this? And I realized that I was looking to just absolve my frustration about a complicated situation,
Mm,
and burden like a person of color with answering it for me, of just being like, you take this further burden of explaining or doing or whatever, so I can absolve myself of frustration. But the problem is that it's an inherently, we live in a frustrating like state of being, like political problems are frustrating inherently, and no one gets to escape the frustration. No one can absolve themselves of the frustration. And if you do so, like, or if you're looking, not even looking to do that, but if you like, yeah, if you absolve yourself, you're a shitty person. If you decide to absolve yourself, you are
mhm.
you are I think making a shitty kind of choice. And so that was the kind of like realization I had, that I I just want to like communicate and get out there. Not that anyone's fucking listening, but I just feel, again, I wanted to say that because it was like a profound moment for me as
Mhm.
like an ally, to be like, I can't rephrase it in any other ways. Don't absolve yourself of frustration. Things are just frustrating. That's how it is.
Yeah.
That is the end of my rant.
Mm. Um, I know that like at some point I remember having a thought of, and I do have something else to say based on some things you said, but they're not as related to this. Um, where like especially with like the dating sim stuff, where like at a certain point, and especially with this, at a certain point, I have to like accept that I will fuck up. I will fuck this up at some point. There will be something that I do that is just like kind of fucked up, you know? And in the meantime, all I can do is my best. And then if somebody goes, hey, to be like receptive and to kind of like take the proper steps to resolve, to listen, to change things that need to be changed. You know what I mean? Um, uh, I think that's just sort of like a fact of it. There's not too much more as like somebody who's like white. That's just what it's gonna be, you know. And eventually, I will fuck up, and that's kind of what it is. And then I took down this note. I got my notebook because I was like, maybe it'll help if I make notes as things are happening. I can kind of hold back to certain. You were talking about dragons. I got really fucking hyped over dragons, specifically not European dragons. Um, they're fine. I like dragons in general. Um, I don't like D&D dragons. I don't like the way they look, and I think they're boring. And so I tend to like, even like if I'm utilizing like a regular D&D dragon. Hold on. Okay, interesting. I just felt like I heard my cat crying at the door. They were supposed to eat like a little bit ago, but Moonboy's had his meal. But so even when I'm utilizing like dragons in D&D, there is a lot of flavor text going on and a lot of things that I'm changing because I just think they could be a lot cooler. However, more often than not, I'm homebrewing my dragons. And so something that I have done a little bit of that maybe like might be, I don't know, this could be helpful for you to like utilize this a little heavier in this idea of dragons you had is that like instead of going just like full like Eastern dragon, something I started doing was I started like reading descriptions of what or like looking into what dinosaurs look like. And like actually like the ones that had feathers and the like, you know what I mean? Um, because I think there's a little bit of crossover aesthetically. Not entirely, but I started taking note of those features. It helps that my roommate is one of his biggest things is dinosaurs and accurate dinosaurs. If we see anything even kind of dinosaur related, he will immediately be like, "Nope, that's not what that looked like." So I had like somebody who had already like talked to me a lot about this, and that's kind of where I got this idea. Like when I started thinking about like the way that I wanted to do dragons, which was actually quite a long before I even started doing any of this. Um, and so that was very helpful for me to instead of like fully rip that to take a peek at like different types of dinosaurs and what they actually looked like versus like what we think what or like what they are more likely to have looked like versus like what we see in like Jurassic Park and whatnot. And that was a lot easier because there is some crossover and also there's some really cool features that like I was like, oh, actually that's sick, like let me use that. And I do still go a little bit more classically East Asian. I feel personally more comfortable, using things from there. But that would be like my thing for anybody else who doesn't kind of immediately want to go with that European dragon is to take a look at just straight up dinosaurs. So there's a lot of really interesting things and a lot of really like different traits that they have, and but they've still got this almost like um because depending on what kind of like Eastern dragon you're looking at, many of them just don't have scales. And it's just like not a thing, or you're kind of like more never ending story like type beat, fluffy and unless you really want the scales, then by all means like take the scales. But as far as like coloration, scales, feathers, like whatever, different um like I have ones that have like beaks, that kind of like sit under. There's so many different things you can do with that will kind of still have that look, that feeling, that aesthetic that doesn't just like fully rip from it. Um and also making dragons is fun and cool.
Let me talk about fucking dragons for a second. There's a whole video on my YouTube channel about Dragon My World. And it's like very bare bones because here's the thing. Here's this kind of implies a certain element of the world building in my world. I just had a really weird thought that I've never thought about that I should have thought about. Anyways, um, so and I kind of maybe alluded to or mentioned a parallel idea I think last episode when I was talking about the Fae, in that not every place in my world has a Feywild. Not every place is connected to the Feywild. I think my so here my cosmos here. You have the elemental planes, the six elemental planes, the earth, water, fire, air, light, and dark crashing together that make the material plane. So you have the underdark layer and the surface world, and those are on the same kind of axis. And then around that, you have um, nine other planes of existence that overlap. And so included in that are the Shadowfell and the Feywild, but also you have like a land of like monsters, a land of dragons, a land of like giants, and four other things. This has always been a very vague concept in my world, um, because the implications of it, I think, are I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how to use words right here. Um, I'm gonna move on. So anyways, there is a so dragons have a specific kind of origin, and I can kind of adjust this. I kind of get funky with it. But what I don't like about D&D dragons, I don't like this idea. So, for example, in Spelljammer, I like in the last like 3 months, I finally got Spelljammer. I read through the book or the whatever the monster in the Spelljammer thing was, and I was like, oh, there's like a sun dragon, and but then there's also in an earlier book there's like and dragons are too. There's no like logic to them that I can follow. And to be fair, I've read none of the fucking lore. I don't give a shit. I don't want to read any D&D lore. I hate it. I don't hate it that much. I just can't be fucked. So I came up with a set of logistics for dragons in my world, which dragons are very powerful beings. At the dawn of time, there was a collection of dragons born in different places in the world, and so you have Ferodal being one of them. Ferodal is like this like country up here, and there you had the 10 progenitor dragons of the chromatic and metallic dragons. And so there's like, oh, there's the gold dragon and whatever, all this shit. Um, and so that is a structure in the world. The function of dragons is a structure in the world. And so there are 5 different kinds of dragons in line with like the Fruitic, the like East Asian. There are dragons who take on more like um uh animal like characteristics that are like vaguely like maybe their function in the world is to be more representative of like maybe in Africa or something. Um uh and then there is aquatic dragons and there are spiritual dragons because I was running out of ideas. And so that is like the structure of dragons. All the dragons need to fit into one of those categories and are one of 10 things in those categories. Um, and so that is the way I have like accepted dragons in my world. That makes sense. That is the logistics, whatever. Um, but I need that structure. I need that structure for everything. I think if there's any theme that we're realizing about Jesse in this episode, is that we need structure. We need rigidity. We need things to be as complex as they need to be and as simple as they can be. So that's I mean that's the end of my thoughts on it. But anyways, so there's Dragonlands that anyway, I'm gonna shut up. I want to stop talking.
uh dragons. I mean, in all fairness, I'd be fucking with dragons so I could just listen to a bunch of rantings about dragons for a period of time. um I didn't even necessarily think that I have like a super clear like way that I go about things. I don't know. Because I like to be logistic. But at a certain point, I'm like, it's cool. And I said so. That's the power of a DM. It's cool and I said so. And but there are definitely things that I can get very hung up on.
Mhm.
I don't know. Um, what was I gonna say? There was something else. Um, uh, I don't remember. All I can think about is how that I like vehemently agree with like the idea of like, yeah, fuck reading the actual lore from the book.
That was
Nobody
like
cares about that.
one of the first things that you said where I was like, oh, we're pretty similar. That was like one of the first. I was like, yeah, yep, I agree
And then there's a
completely.
conversation from a really long time ago where I was like, yeah, I'll just do whatever I want.
Yeah,
Like, there's probably like half of that book that like I probably read like once a very long time ago. I remember, I know because I had a moment where I forgot about orc racism, and because I don't even like think about it. I know what I'm looking for when I go in the book, but I'm looking for stats for certain things. Like, I don't give a fuck about the rest. And I think I told you about this that me and my friend, some of my players, were talking about what alignment Batman would be, which alignments are kind of like silly and
mhm.
dumb anyway, and I don't hold very strongly to them. I view them as like loose guidelines, and
I almost never think about them unless a player is like, I'm this alignment, and I'm like, yeah, okay.
I don't I don't really think about I was a little bit conscious of them in when I was running Curse of Strahd because there were certain gameplay mechanics that might have to do with it. But it was even less about the alignment and more about like um how do I put this? Like certain items that were conscious. You know what I mean? No, would not like fuck with certain players because of, but even then I was thinking more about their choices and things that they have done, and
I
rather than like
feel like
what alignment they
alignment
chose.
just streamlines those conversations. So rather than a DM who like maybe because not every DM like is going to think about shit that much. Like I was having this thought before we started today, but between the session and between the start time, um, where I was like, I was trying to like in my head figure out how much more D&D I run than almost everyone else. Like, because on average, the average person I would have to guess runs, and this could even be a lot higher, or rather a lot lower. I could be highballing this, but I would say the average person plays, or like the average DM runs 2 sessions a week, 2 different campaigns, and we'll assume like 45 weeks of the year. So that's like 90 sessions a year if they're like lucky. And
Mm-hmm.
that I think that could be really highballing it. I do that in 2 months. Um, so in 2 months, I run more sessions than I think most people do in a year. It's probably less than that. But
Mm-hmm.
anyways, um, I think alignment streamlines the morality conversation for the
I would
average
agree.
person.
I sometimes I will even ask a player for it, but it's not because I have any expectations. I'm just getting like a general idea of the like how you might plan to play your character. You know, what area are they generally going to sit? When I present something to you, what are you shooting for? And even then, do you know how many times I've played with somebody who's just like they're like, I'm this alignment, blatantly goes full opposite, and they're like, I'm gonna kill him, and I'm like, are you sure?
It's always the
um,
chaotic neutral people who are like, I murder. And it's like that's not
that's not what that
neutral.
means.
You've misunderstood.
Yeah, it maybe, but I remember when we were having this argument, we were just like, it was like none of us like take alignments that seriously. It was just like a for fun conversation, you know? And I remember when I went because we were arguing about the semantics of one of the alignments, and I went to go read a passage, and it was like something evil. I can't even remember it. That's how much I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? um, but I remember like something evil and it being like, yes, orcs are generally and I was like, whoa, what? I know that, but because I don't give a fuck about the book's lore, it just like caught me off guard. Like I it's been so long since I engaged in that kind of mindset that it completely threw me off guard. And so many times I will like look in the book for something and kind of like catch a piece of lore and be like, oh, that's dumb. I'm gonna ignore that. And I know like Brandon, who's running Light of Darkness right now, just like a silly little break campaign before we get to the gang death slavery. Um, and a little break for me, I get to just play, and I'm having a lot of fun just playing. Um, Although I had like the realization of like, no, actually, I prefer to DM, and so I enjoy playing, but I'm also like, can we just speed up the like next few months? Like, I'm ready to go. And uh Brandon had this moment where he like did something completely off, like so drastically off book, and he was like nervous about it. He was getting there. I think there's something about like I'm sure like at a certain point in DMing, this is like not really something you experience. But I remember like it's not really something I experience very often now either. But I remember when I first started DMing, the feeling of like, did you guys like it? Did you have, but was that too much? So he was kind of having that moment over the room, and I looked at him. I said, "Was that in the book?" And he went, "No." And we kind of had to talk about how like when you're running the 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 books, when you're running what Wizards of the Coast actually puts out, there's so many points when you're like, I'm not gonna do that. I don't like it. It's not that good, and I could make it better. And that's how I feel about not just like the adventures and campaigns, but pretty much the entirety of like the player's handbook. And like I look at it, I'm like, no, I don't like that. I'm gonna do whatever I want with that actually instead. So
Yeah, I especially with like I think the first thing, the only thing I knew, not the only thing I knew, but one of the things that like initially turned me off, like one of the first things that I tried to read into, it's like Dragonborn live in clans and do this, and it's
oh
like,
my
why do they
god.
do that?
What?
Why? Why do they live separate from people? And I think that's like tuning into the that is a function of a a racist fantasy. I wouldn't even go as far to say a racist story, but that is a racist fantasy. And I think because it's like it's innocuous as well. I think that's one thing that I didn't mention earlier is like how innocuous a lot of the world building is, where if you just accept it and just kind of run with it, you don't you have to like examine it and break it down to anyways getting
Mhm.
I have a different thing I want to talk about, which is um I was having a thought. So I'm having so this is the first time after like saying it out loud because a lot of concepts in my world I've realized live exclusively in my brain and aren't real until I talk about them. And so I was talking about those lands, those like things that the Feywild and all that shit's it's different.
Mhm.
And you're talking, I was looking at my map again. And specifically I was looking at Monothan. Because Monothan's the funkiest place in my world. It has a pink forest, it has an orange forest, it has a purple forest, and all of the
Purple.
because of the size of that place, all of those places have to be lands into themselves. So they have to have some separation. But then that means, Tucker, that by
Mhm.
this logistic of every kind of land is paired with a part of it's either the Feywild or the Shadowfell or the Dragon or whatever. All of those feasibly have they can't all be the same thing because I know what the initial influence was, but they can't all be the same. So they have to be different. So I was thinking about what you're saying about dragons earlier, and I was thinking about my own logistics. This is very exciting. This is a very exciting thought for me. Major dragons and minor dragons.
Major dragons and minor dragons. Would you like to expand on that?
Would I? So major dragons. So I think the structure that I described for dragons, the like five different kinds and 10 flavors of each kind, is the structure for the major dragons. I think minor dragons are things like wyverns or things that are like
Yeah.
dragon like, but they're not full on. And I don't think they have progenitors like the other structure of dragons. I think because in my world, a progenitor dragon, there's one in Philia that a party's going to meet, that a bunch of people are going to meet. There's one in Philia that literally they are so big. The first time I ever introduced one in a campaign, I was like, this level like 10 party, maybe less, was like, you see a Tarrasque. The Tarrasque turns to ice, and a head of a giant silver dragon comes down and bites it up.
Mhm.
And that was the like indication of size of like this like dragon, maybe not the size of a city block, but is like the head of it is massive, and so the body is like beyond your mortal comprehension of how big this fucking. It's a mountain. Um. So the world can only fit so many of those dragons in it. But if they're minor dragons, they don't have those progenitors. Anyways, so that was just a thought that I had, and also yesterday in Canada, in Toronto, it
Canada.
was snowing and it was thundering. And I had this thought about the Cthulhu fragments. I'm gonna shut the fuck up in a second because I've really just gone on these tangents. My brain just going for it. But I okay, so imagine this. It's a snowing, it's blizzarding, it's extra cold. It is not the typical conditions in which you can get thunder snow, which is apparently a thing that exists.
Mhm.
Lightning strikes the blizzard and it immediately freezes and then collapses and then a bunch of ice shards just fall into the ground as like super sharp blades. That's just I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Jesus fuck. Oh, whoops. Um, my cat is officially yelling through the door. So one moment. Actually, no, I don't want to let her in. Never mind. I
Where
just
was
realized like how annoying and distracting she'll be. And I was like, oh, absolutely not. Which because she was already distracting me there, and I was like, if I'm already getting distracted, because she's making noise there, separate from me, how
she's
distracted
gonna
am I going to be when she gets in here? And this is the true bastard cat. Worst cat I've ever had. So I just don't want to
what
do that.
alignment do you think the cat is?
So okay.
Has this been thought about
One
before?
time
That was the face of someone who's been like, I've thought about this.
we one time over COVID. So when COVID first happened, Starbucks did this thing where they offered you like 3 months pay, and it ended up extending to like 4 5 months or something like that. So me and Ellen took it. So we were home all the time with nothing to do. And we did this thing where we determined what classes all of our animals were, um, what their stats were, their alignments, the whole thing. And we had this like sheet of paper and we just like mark things that they did down every day for like a week or two. And like we would just like very closely examine them. We are very bored. um and and Hypatia, she's scratching the door. She's so persistent, first of all. Like so persistent. And I was like, here's the thing, is that it's first, yeah, evil. Evil to her core. She doesn't like the other animals. And sometimes she can tolerate them, but when Grant was a puppy, it wasn't just like, oh, he's in my space, I'm going to attack him. It was like he's across the room. I'm going to run over there to beat the shit out of him and then leave. So it's not even like don't come near me. This is my no. She's just fucking mean. I don't know what her problem is. And for anybody listening, she's fine. She's fine, and the other animals are fine. She's a little bitch. Like you just kind of like scare her a little bit, she'll run away. She's just puffing her chest. And she's so fucking selfish. She's such a selfish bitch. So I've thought about her and Moon Boy's alignments because I don't necessarily think that Moon Boy is like in the good realm either. But that's because I don't know if a Moon Boy can quite be like defined by an alignment because he isn't bad. Maybe like a true neutral. He enjoys being affectionate, but I also think that he doesn't know where he is ever. So I'm not sure that he has like a very good grasp of like his surroundings and like if somebody's petting him. I love to joke that I don't think he actually knows who me or Brandon are. and he forgets who we are after like 30 seconds, but he cares so little that he sees us again. And he's like, oh, cool, human, pick me up. And that's how he experiences life. He's sitting on the floor right next to me, being a little guy. Hypatia, on the other hand, she knows who everybody is. She remembers your face. She knows who you are. She has a formed opinion about how she feels about you. However, she's still easy to trick because she's selfish. She's a selfish bitch. So if you make it seem like you're going to do something nice for her, she'll still kind of like get wrapped into it. Um, and so I thought maybe like in a chaotic neutral or chaotic evil because she's just such a raging cunt all the time. And um, uh, I do know that like she would 100% be like a rogue, you know. And we've done, I don't have the papers that say her stats anymore. I remember she was the lowest of them. And then like Moon Boy is like a cleric. He can take a lot and he's just a big guy. He's a big guy you could take he you know, it's hard to he's stocky, but he's also like healing. You know, he lays on your chest and he purrs and he's healing. I can't remember what the dog was. I can't remember what Grant was. Something very I don't know innocuous, but I've thought about this. I've thought about it quite a lot, and I think about it all the time. With everything, and I've like we've gone over. Me and my entire friend group have a comprehensive list of all of everybody we know, all their classes, subclasses, and alignments. So that's another thing that has been like thoroughly discussed. So I could tell you like everybody's deal. Oh my God. I haven't done that to Jack or Brick yet, though. I should do that to them soon. I should make that decision for them.
I had I had a couple of lines of thought. I didn't know which one I want to go down. I don't.
First, I want you to guess. Guess what I am.
Oh, guess what you are?
Yeah.
Okay. Um,
Guess what other people decide to label me
other
as.
people decide to lead. How do okay? So how do people generally have the same perspective that I do of you? Because I know that so I don't know if I want to dive too personal here, but people typically tend to tell me that or what I hear a lot is I've never told anyone this. I hear that phrase a lot or something to that effect. So I tend to get to know people on a level not so profound that no one else knows them on that level, but I tend to have a unique perspective on everyone. Like people tend to show me a different side. So do you think that my perspective on you is aligned with
I think that you think I'm nicer than I am.
okay. Um I'm aware of that to some extent because from the way you talk about yourself. So what's Jesse saying here? So yeah, nicer. So I think that puts you on the neutral scale rather than the good scale. Um I don't interpret you as fully chaotic, but you're definitely not lawful.
Uh-huh.
So I think true neutral.
Uh-huh.
Um uh Now you're not I don't interpret you to be a sneaky guy to me. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that rules out rogue. You might
Mm-hmm.
be you could be scrappy like a fighter, but I also feel a bit more like warlocky for you. Like you could be like a like fighter warlock multi-class, like that's an option. I don't think barbarian works for you. You don't seem
Mm-hmm.
naturalistic. You don't seem like a hippie, so ranger and druid are out. You're not a fucking dorko artificer or wizard. So I would say if I could only choose one class, I would say true neutral warlock.
I it is so interesting that your perception of me versus people who know me in real life. And I would be so interested to get like somebody like Jack or Brooks' opinion, who
Mhm.
also know me primarily over the internet.
Well, that's
Um,
that's that's what I think other people see you as.
but it's very interesting the way you perceive me, the way the rest of my friends perceive
Mhm.
me. I'll put it like this. I most of my friends box. That's how a lot of them are interconnected.
Okay.
Is that they all box together, they all spar together. They've tried to get me into it. I simply don't care. I don't have the time. um, Max Max works out regularly. He works a very physically like heavy job, labor intensive job. He he'll spar with them. Max has said he wouldn't fight me. He says he thinks he'll lose. That's and that's primarily because I also once my little sister, when she was in like freshman year or whatever, she had a boyfriend, big ass dude. Or no way, he was average size, I think, but the guy I was hanging around at the time, not quite my boyfriend, but the guy who was hanging around at the time, big, big, big dude. And her boyfriend said, I would rather take my chances with him than with you, and pointed at me. I said, why? He said, because I don't know what you're going to do to me. Like, I don't know what you've got on you. Um, and the general opinion is, and generally the way I am is because like, it's kind of like I know you've seen Game of Thrones.
Hmm.
I don't
Hmm.
know like how your memory is with Game of Thrones.
My memory about everything is perfect. Assume that
There is
from the
this
starting
like
point.
the scene where like Tyrion Lannister. I've seen this scene recently, so I think it helps. But I say that like I haven't seen Game of Thrones 6 times. I need to
Mm.
stop pretending like I'm not like a huge shut up, Tucker. Trying to save my ass, save face.
We're on a
Um,
podcast that we do together about Dungeons and Dragons. Fucking nerd.
it is fine. There's a scene where like Tyrion Lannister has like been taken by Catelyn Stark, and he's in the Eyrie,
Mhm.
and he's
He
demands a
murders the
trial by
guy with his. Oh,
combat.
okay, never mind.
And there's that scene where Bronn is fighting the other guy, and they're like, "You don't fight with honor," and he's like, "No, but he did." That's how people around me view me,
Mm.
as just like very scrappy. Me and Cameron have like had long talks about which one of us would ultimately win because we are both think that the universe might just like implode instead. um, because we're both like very little scrappy. Oh, I'm being told my internet connection is unstable.
You
Please
you
don't do
you
that.
you fumbled there for a second, but everything's still coming through. It's all
Okay,
good.
wonderful. But
Scrappy.
that's generally how other people view me as like very scrappy. I remember there was somebody who was like some girl with like my brother wanted to like she was like I'm gonna fight him. It was like a friend and my brother and I was like do it and my brother looked at her and went you don't want this because Mindy's gonna beat your ass. I was like um but and I got into a lot of fights growing up. When I moved and I moved into like a really nice area with my dad, I had a huge like culture like whiplash because like I was the only person trying to start like I would start fights. Um and eventually like I cooled down a little bit. I've mellowed out over the years. Um but that is generally how I'm perceived as like very scrappy. Uh um so here's the thing is that I and we multi-classed each other. Like when we were deciding
Okay.
for each other, we would multi-class for each other. Um um I'm trying to like think of a good example, but so I was labeled as like a rogue barbarian.
Okay.
Um the rogue thing, the kind of like scrappy aspect. I'm generally like not super big and um however the barbarian is because I do have a tendency to I have a little bit of the rage thing going on. Again, it's mellowed out significantly, you know what I mean? Like significantly throughout the years, but in my youth, I was very much like one time we ended up being really good friends. For some reason, I always end up really good friends with people I tried to beat the shit out of. This kid who I was really close with in high school named Tomas. We became friends because in middle school he threw a burrito at me, and I tracked him down after school, and I like shoved him against a wall. And luckily there was another person there, and they were like, "Okay, stop." But like it was over like something as little as that would make me like, "Oh, you're gonna die. Don't throw a burrito at me." And so that's generally how they label me. Um, in fact, they were very quick on that too. They were very quick to be like, "Yep, that's who you are." And then they sat in the for alignment. I think they settled on the chaotic good.
Okay.
Um,
Because
uh,
that's chaotic good is how I would describe you. Um, uh, more in the sense of when on the good spectrum, you are
yeah,
not neutral or lawful. Um, I still wouldn't put you
remember
as
that.
and I can because I just don't see I don't, people don't get angry around me.
You've never
Um,
given me well, and here's the thing is I don't really get angry with my friends either.
mhm.
However, I've been in positions with them where where they have seen me like um the most recent example, and this was still like 2 years ago. I've mellowed out a lot. And that's partially like a lot of therapy on my end. My dad's side of the family has like really deep seated anger issues. And it was like something I really struggled with for years. Um, this has just become the Talk About Tucker podcast. And so it's mellowed out a lot since then. I don't generally have blow ups on like my friends and whatnot. But the dog food got delivered. We used to have packages delivered to my mom's house because we lived in an apartment complex and we'd rather just have go to the house and not have to deal with somebody taking them off our doorstep. Somebody could still steal it, it's just less likely to happen. And I went and I looked at the picture and I realized that it wasn't my house, it was my neighbor's house. Now our neighbor sucks. He's this really old crotchety man. And there's a school right behind my mom's house. My siblings would jump our own fence to go play at the playground there, hang out in the field. You know, they're teenagers, that kind of thing. And they would kind of like grab part of his fence, just grab it. You know what I mean? And he put a board with nails there. Just like absolute like garbage human being. Hates fun in any like capacity. Didn't like us, and like the whole thing is like really weird because like yes, my family's very loud and kind of ghetto, but the whole thing was like the reason that he really doesn't like us is I think it was from the beginning sort of thing because he was the only neighbor who like avoided us when we moved in, and then second of all we had the ambulance at our house a lot, but I think there was like an assumption that that was because there was like something going on, but in reality my stepdad struggled with like seizures and problems like that, so that's why they were there, and I think he just hated it. But I was like, fuck, I really don't want to go talk to this guy. I go over there, I knock on his door, and I start really nice. I go, "Oh, hi, I'm so sorry," but before I can even say anything, he slams the door in my face. And that like sent me. And I walked back in my mom's house, and I slammed the door and I kicked the wall, and I was like, and I was yelling outside of his house, and I was like, fuck you. I'm gonna fuck you up. I don't care if you're old. Luckily, my brother was there, my lovely brother. And he knows how to handle things very well. He just started taking pictures at the guy's house. Not to, he was just like, nah. And the guy came out. And that was why my brother did it. He was like, I know if I start doing something like that, the guy's going to come out and talk to me. And he was able to get the food back. And I remember he said to him, he was like, the guy like opens his garage where they put the dog food, which is like it's like big bulk dog food. It's expensive. And the guy pulls it out. My brother was like, wow, was that so hard? You could have done that so much earlier when my sister was being perfectly nice to you at the time. And like again, I've mellowed out like considerably because in that time span I've gone to a lot of fucking therapy. And like even at that point, I didn't blow up on like people I knew, and it was still like not super common, but it was just something I could get into at times. And then but the best example I think, and I only fight like this, the only person I really blow up like that on who exists is Chloe, one of my friends and players. Jesse has heard much about Chloe, her boyfriend Dawson. Like we are the same. We are the same person. And so he's the one person that like my brain is like, click, I know I can have this kind of argument with him. Because we can yell at each other and like say the meanest, lowest things about each other, and afterwards we'll be like, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. And he'll be like, I'm sorry. That was fucked up. And we feel like so satisfied after just like screaming at each other. It's like the best argument. It's so fulfilling. We just like let it all out on each other. And then we're like, everything's fine now. And it's like, it sounds like super unhealthy, but like when it happens, like Chloe was like, I've never seen Dawson smile so much after arguing with somebody. And so I think that's kind of like where that comes from is like they've had examples of this. And again, in the last few years, it's just not really been something I've gone through. So I think it's not as accurate now as it used to be, you know? But there's not really a reason for that to like, especially if it already doesn't happen that much in my personal life now, especially talking to you. I don't know why I would ever be that fucking upset.
I'm infuriating. I
Worst
get on
person,
people's nerves.
worst person I've
Um,
ever met
yeah, yeah.
in my entire
Agreed.
life.
From my perspective, I would put um I think chaotic good fighter.
Okay.
I don't
I
think
think that's valid though.
mhm. Yeah,
I think that's like in the like a weird sweet spot between like the rogue and barbarian type
because it's like
deal.
you seem scrappy, but rogues are like kind of shitty, like not in a like design sense, but like they're kind of like they're the whole class is like murdering and thieving is like
I
the
used to do a
design of
lot
the
of
class.
thieving.
Well, that doesn't surprise
That
me.
I
Uh,
had I've actually had a shoplifting problem for a while. So I think it like some people having a background on
yeah,
me, that's
yeah.
what changes. It's like you are
Yeah,
have
I
like
can
a
see
picture
like
now,
mhm,
but they've got like the stuff from back there that funnels into their decisions. Because
yeah.
I did used to have like a huge shoplift. I was very good at it. I only got caught once, and it was really dumb. It was on like I'm. You know what?
What do
I'm not
you
gonna talk about it.
what do you think I am from what you know about me?
um. First of all, a huge dork, big dork creature. No,
That's my anger. I'm so
a
angry at being
big,
called a dork.
big
Err.
dork. Um. So like, there's a part of me that wants to slot you into the wizard vibe just for being a huge dork. Um. um.
It's too much work to be a wizard. I mean, I'm gonna
Yeah,
shut up.
that's the only thing that's
You process this yourself. I'm gonna
so
shut up.
look, we're gonna go through the whole thought process. So like there's like the big dork aspect of the wizard, you know? Big, huge dork aspect. Um, I wouldn't put you in any like fighter, barbarian, rogue. No. Take those, toss them out the fucking window. They don't exist here. um oh, okay, wait, there's so many aspects to this that I have to consider. There is like it's the dork, the wizardy thing, but you're also so very like, how do I put this? You like to therapy people. uh, you love to therapy people, and there is like a definitely like a nurturing aspect there. But I still wouldn't say like if I was going to throw you in like cleric or paladin, I would lean more paladin. I think it doesn't help that like the NPC that I know that you're like, this guy's very much like me as a paladin. But again, like I wouldn't really throw you cleric. If I was gonna go in that direction, I would go more paladin than cleric. Definitely like a support vibes.
I I'll give you a hint about at least how I view myself, which is a multi-class. I don't
Okay,
know if you're already thinking
wonderful.
about that, but
I yeah, I'm kind of like breaking. I'm narrowing it down. You know. There's something about I'm also going to go ahead and throw the sorcerer and uh ranger out the window. Those are also extra. My brain wants to make a chart so bad, just because I love making charts and I love making presentations, and so my brain is like, make a chart. Mm. So yeah, ranger, cleric, rogue, fighter, barbarian, um, all in the dumpster, which leaves us with uh bard, wizard, oh, also sorcerer, dumpster, uh, which leaves us with bard, wizard, paladin, artificer, warlock. What do there's somebody. I feel like I'm missing druid, I guess. No, druids feel like wrong also. I think I'm also gonna put that one in the dumpster. Um, and there's just like a peek into like directly how Tucker Mind works is that I really run myself through everything and I pop through all the different like and so instead of doing this in my brain, I'm just doing it out loud. And it usually happens faster than this, but I'm doing it out loud, so I have to Um there is something there is something very how do I say? Like I feel like I definitely want to say paladin. I don't know if that's just because like the nature of the relationship I have with you is that you're always trying to like therapy me and like it's almost like a metaphorical like here's some lay on hands.
I
because I
just
think it helped.
can't help myself when I'm constantly laying my hands on people, you know?
Look at you.
Classic paladin behavior.
Yeah, I'm putting your hands all over everybody all the time. um because I do know a little bit about like how other people generally view you. Um but there's like another part of me that's like there's a conniving, not necessarily conniving in like a rogue way. And there's like my brain is like, I have to tie this back to Lego somehow. um uh I definitely want to say paladin. I feel like that's partially due to my perception of you and our relationship. I'm gonna switch gears really quick while I think about the other thing to alignments because you definitely sit in like the I also am like, is this a part? No, you definitely sit in the good realm, but I don't really view you as chaotic and I don't really view you as new lawful. Alignments fucking suck.
I mean, it's also definitely can't be neutral. I'll throw you a bone here,
Yeah,
which is
maybe
like
like
being anti-capitalist. I don't think you can be lawful or neutral. I think well
oh like I do kind of here's the thing. Sometimes I forget that um about that like aspect there. Yeah, maybe then chaotic good would also be the place to be. Um different kinds of chaotic goods out in the world. Yeah, I definitely place you
I
there.
think you could throw, depending on how you interpret it, you could throw me firmly in chaotic or lawful because I'm like someone who's like pro like um fixing things on an organizational level,
Yeah,
but also like the current
you're a
state of
little
things
blend.
is a little, yeah. So alignment
Yeah.
silly.
It's kind of yeah. No, no, no. I definitely agree. Well, here's the thing. It already works in my brain because I'm the type of person of like, for example, in the Spelljammers game, I'm running a character who, at his heart, is a chaotic neutral, but he wants to be good. And so that's like his whole like thing. The way that I play him is that like his first instinct is like chaotic neutral, but the things that he tries to put out there sit in the good realm. And so like I do kind of like to play around with like, and that's just how I would explain it if I was explaining it by alignments. I think that you can utilize alignments to pull this back heavier into D&D. I feel like you can definitely like fiddle with alignments. I just think it really depends on the person and the DM in the game. Because I know some people take that more seriously. I don't. I don't know a lot of people who do, but um yeah, I don't know. I would throw you as a paladin for sure, chaotic good for sure. I'm
I
not sure about the multi-class.
I'll here's how I view myself.
Uh-huh.
And I'll go through the process of why I view myself this way. Um so I'll tell you this story. And actually, you
Tell
know
me a
what?
story.
Maybe it's not what I initially thought. It's definitely sorcerer. It's definitely sorcerer
Mm-hmm.
because
I can't wait for the
I was
reasoning
just
behind this.
born special.
No, shut up. Shut the fuck up, Jesse.
I it's
No
seriously,
more. Stop it.
I'm okay. So
I'm gonna kick your ass,
here's
just
my
so you know.
backstory.
I would just so
I
you know,
Here's my
I'm
backstory.
coming there and I'm gonna beat your
I'm
ass.
I'm like the shadow. I'm like one of like the shadow touch. So do you know about my back tattoo and why it's never mind.
Wait, what do you
This hasn't been
mean?
explained to you before. Never mind.
No,
This
absolutely.
everything.
Jesse, one of the first things I asked you about was your back tattoo
Yeah.
ever.
Okay. So anyways, so
I can't believe you don't
you should
remember
know where
that.
I'm going.
Fake
Um.
friend.
Uh. This is the most exciting part of this podcast has been ever. I was born addicted to a shit ton of drugs. I had all these predispositions, but the way I turned out was like gifted. And I've never had to, and it's also probably because I'm some form of autistic, but not so autistic that it's like a like it's like held me back in a way that I haven't recovered from. Like everything about me, I feel like comes from um fucking what's it called? Um yeah, I'm just I haven't had to work very hard um in a school sense. I kind of can just wing things. Because that's like a gifted autism thing and maybe other things. So that's why I interpret sorcerer. I interpret
I feel
sorcerer
like most like labeled gifted kids could could probably relate to the sorcerer one.
yeah. And
That's
so
not something I knew about you actually.
oh
That
yeah,
part.
well that yeah. So I've always kind of seen myself, and because so the other reason I view I think sorcerers, because sorcerers are privileged as hell. It's just they're just born with abilities. Fuck you. But so that's how I kind of view myself. Of like I don't think I've had to work very hard to be creative. Like I don't think I'm ever really challenging myself in creative avenues. It just kind of comes out. Um, and so that's why I'm very opposed to wizard or anything that like requires a lot of work. Because although I do a lot of work, I don't view it as like having I
I
really
just wanted an excuse to call you a nerd.
yeah, that's fair. Um, and so sorcerer paladin, I was initially viewing as divine soul sorcerer. But I think only to like fit in theme better with paladin. I think it's there's like a shadow sorcerer, and I think with like the like back tattoo and like the mental health predispositions and like the thing that I've always like constructed my life around trying to avoid or to not get sucked into. I think that fits very well into like with some kind of shadow theme of a sorcerer. And then like I don't know if there's a specific subclass of paladin that I choose, but definitely paladin. Definitely the someone who's like takes the paladin role, but more sorcerer. Paladin for the
Mm,
smites. Because I think I definitely like go to bat for people when I have to. I really and I won't get into some stuff. But yeah, I think I can go to bat for people when I need to. Um, and so Paladin, like the commitment, the oath, like especially bit of Jesse lore. So there is a word, and this is my oath, the oath of equanimity. So equanimity is a word that means, and it comes, I think this has a Christian origin. I'm not religious at all, but equanimity means to be like well tempered, or to like not rise, or to be very very slow to rise to anger. And I've always had this as like a fundamental um principle of mine, because I knew how dangerous um it could be if I wasn't careful. I knew with being predisposed to like manic depression and BPD, which I'm fairly certain I experienced symptoms of, and all these things, I had to get it under control. So that's like my oath and source or origin. And yeah, probably chaotic good. Um, uh, but depending on, it's I switch between like chaotic good action and lawful action. Um,
Mm-mm. And
yeah, but I
I
think I
very rarely sit in that lawful zone.
hmm. But yeah, I think that's my breakdown. Does that make sense? Do you feel
It
that's
makes sense. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The sorcerer thing, yeah, that was like something I didn't. The original part was something I didn't initially know about you. I was also like the labeled gifted when I was younger. However, it was a lie. I was just like in a really bad neighborhood. So like when I went to a school that had like a good education system, I didn't know what the fuck was going on. I
but I think
actually
that's
I
also
won't play myself too. Like that's me kind of like is shitting on myself a little bit
yeah, I don't think you're
because
giving yourself enough credit for, because that's just a tough situation. You're being set up for failure there, and it's not your fault.
yeah. And then I also like the minute that I got to like when I moved with my dad, who was in a much better area. He lived in a very safe area, with a better school system. Something I was very unused to. But I also was like, didn't realize how terrible my life was, and so I like very quickly, like 11 or 12, and like coming into middle school there, 13, whatever, very quickly, like depression took like a very strong hold on my life. I'm so fucking mentally ill. And so it was very hard for me to find motivation in anything because it wasn't even just like academics that I was really good in, is that like my whole family was like, this is a creative kid, da 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 da. And I completely lost like all of my motivation to do anything. I didn't really, you know what I mean? And so I got like very consumed by my depression from a very young age. I just like lived in it, completely engulfed in it, which also had like a very big effect on me. And I was also my home situation with my dad. While I was less concerned about like bills and money and being able to eat, my dad was like very physical with us. So it was just like a not good time overall. Um, and then you like stack on that like my problems with like sleeping. I just performed very poorly in school. I think from all these different factors. But I like when before I was a part of like this program that was like for the kids who excelled in that kind of thing. And there was like a whole thing about that. But there are like areas where I struggle. But that was like a thing that I also experienced at a young age, was like the whole gifted ordeal, which honestly I wish that I hadn't. I wish that adults had like left me the fuck alone. Um, but so it's something that I was kind of like I didn't really like think about it from that perspective, um, a lot. But it's something that I'm not necessarily surprised we share in common,
Mhm.
even if it's like a different type of experience there.
Um,
We're not even talking. We need to go back to talk about D&D. Talk about D&D.
I yeah. Do we have to? I don't know. I feel like, well, okay. So here, my brain. What I feel like this could just be a Jesse and Tucker lore dump. The second half of the
Lore
episode.
dump episode.
Yeah. I feel like that's fine. Um. I'm inclined, because in the last 2 days, last episode was 3 hours, and we cut a little bit out. Burping. We cut a little bit out for some reason. It still was like 3 hours and 9 minutes, and we've just passed the 2 hour mark. And right. So I think I think I'm just tired. And I think it's a fair place to call it here as a because I don't want to. I want to come in with a fuller idea of a concept I'm talking about, and I there's some interesting thoughts we had or I had. We share a brain, whatever. Um, about things that maybe pull. But anyways, I want to come in with a topic, with an idea, with a thing
Mm.
that'll take us into whatever directions. Now I'm thinking about stuff. Anyways, so I think we
I'm
should
trying
probably
to think about what we even were talking about that.
we talked about a
So
lot of
you
races and
mentioned
stuff.
my catch, and that's how this got out of control.
Is
But it
that?
was like, the
Oh yeah, that's
yeah.
true.
But then I'm like, what the fuck were we talking about
We
before?
okay. Recap of the episode in case you're skipping to the end for some reason. So at the start we talk about racism. We keep going on that, and eventually we arrive at a point that is somewhat well communicated. We slide into talking about dragons a little bit, and I explain an idea, and then we start getting a little personal, a little bit, just little touches here and there, but it just keeps going personal. There's not a whole lot of idea, and there it related back to like alignments and stuff, and what it was kind of personal, and that's okay. But um, yeah, I think you know what we'll do. Surprise, it's over.